Thank you, Chairman.
Deputy Murphy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Watt and your officials for coming in. How are the budget negotiations going? Any hints, any tips?
My experience is that the Minister for Finance and Minister of Public Expenditure Reform would prefer for them to announce the budget as opposed for me to announce it now. I think that might be a career-changing moment. For me, quite dramatic career-changing moment, which I don't fancy at this stage. So the ministers will make their announcements.
You can tell
10 days. 10 days.
You can tell me after, it's fine.
10 days from now.
The area I want to look at, if I could, is something raised by the CNHE, and it relates to pensions and the pension liability on the state, looking from today really into the long term. And just some of the figures I wanted to go through first were in relation to the superannuation and retired allowances vote. In 2011, recorded gross expenditure was 433 million, and then increasing to 520 million in 2012. Have we a figure for 2013?
The figure for 2013 will be lower than that, based on the latest figures. It's made up of two broad components. It's the ongoing payments to the 20,000 plus civil servants who are retired, and then there's the lump sum payments from people who retire in a given year. I think the lump sum payments are about 80 million, 100 million, thereabouts. So anyway, there's a significant part. So for this year, I think retirements will be less than we anticipated, and you can speculate about why this is. A lot of people who would have been coming up to retirement age have gone already. A lot of people have left, and colleagues may be holding on until the end August of next year, because that's when the new arrangements come in. So the pensions will be based then on the salaries, the post-Haddington Road cut salaries for colleagues over 65,000. So there might be an element of either those people who want to retire have gone, or people who are planning to retire are going to hang on until up to that date. So in effect, retirements are lower for this year, and the lump sums I think will be lower, and the estimate will be under the 520. We're on three quarters in, so we'll see the year. So it'll be 500 million plus, Deputy, I think is it best to say at this stage.
And does that mean that the jump from 2011 to 2012 is based on that increase in lump sum payments?
Yeah, there's a number of factors. I think very important here that the increase in pension costs was inevitable given when we recruited. The civil service expanded during the 70s, as you know. So we always had this demographic issue and demographic bulge coming through. So it's an increase that was coming anyway, and it's maybe brought forward a bit because we had various initiatives to encourage people to retire earlier. So most of the cost that you see in reflecting the vote now is the demographic impact of us expanding the system back when we did, and people now reaching retirement age. Now, in any given year, there's a big element of it which is the once-off payment, the gratuity payment. So that can spike as we've seen. So next year, if we don't have anybody retiring, let's say, of course we will, but if let's say we didn't, well then you would have a dramatic fall in that part of the vote, even though the ongoing payments obviously would have to be made.
So that spike last year was anticipated. It was something that was.
Well, once we've got a sense of the numbers of people who are going to retire, obviously it's difficult to predict in advance of any given year. Once we've got a sense of that, we have to make provision for the gratuity payment in the vote.
But it sounds then that you think that expense is going to increase next year. It's going to jump again.
I think it depends really what happens in the next 3 months in terms of people retiring. Will people retire before the end of the year? And if that happens, well, then the payments will fall into this year, or will they wait till next year? So it's really
But you think they might because of that August deadline hang on until next year?
Yeah, we just don't know. We just don't know. Yeah. Yeah, and there are other issues around people leaving the pension scheme, and there are various different factors that impact upon it. But in essence, it's the numbers who retire will determine the change.
So we might think around the 500 mark for 2013, but then rising again next year. It's anticipated because of this August deadline. It seems
we're drawing up the estimate now. I think it'll probably be around the same sort of figure, 500, 520 for next year. But we haven't finalised it yet.
And that's just the pension scheme for civil servants, is it? That's
right.
So it doesn't include other people working in the public sector?
That's right.
So what's the total then outgoing when we look at just...
the total pension costs are about 3 billion.
3 billion.
Across the system. and speaking from memory, I think it's about 2.3, 2.4 billion ongoing payments this year and about 500, 600 million gratuities. I could be, is that right? Could be mistaken. So that's a broad figure. So it's about
And that's including the civil servant.
Yeah, that's the total.
That's the total. Okay.
That's the total. That's the okay. So it's actually lower than I thought. Yeah, this is a net figure. Yeah. So the net figure is 2.5 billion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, the gross figures are
It's about 3.1.
about 3.1 billion, as I said. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's across. And if you look through the biggest areas as you expect, the gross figures there will be better. Again, I'll give them to the deputy. Yeah, 3 billion is the number. So our own vote for the civil service mentioned in Garda is 300 million for 2013. For education, 1.1 billion for pensions alone. And that's an issue within the education vote, which has to be managed every year, because as teachers retire, they're replaced. So you have, obviously, the cost of a new teacher is lower than the cost of the retired teacher. When you add in the pension, then it actually leads to an increase in the vote. If you go down through the elements, then the smaller departments have army pensions over 200 million now. Obviously, army personnel retire younger. And then the HSC then it's over 750 million. So this is in table 5 of the estimates. It's set out. The details are
Thank
there.
you. And just in relation then to I mean, is your department involved in those negotiations or any negotiations, or in relation to those individual departments? Are you keeping an eye on their anticipated increases for next year?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something that is discussed between yourself and them.
So as part of the settling of the estimate, a big element of it relates to pay bill. We discussed earlier, numbers policy, and then numbers of people retired. So when we draw up the estimate, which we're finalising now, as you can appreciate, all those different factors are taken into account. So education will have to form a view as to the number of teachers who will retire next year. Now, for this year, they're saying that the numbers are lower than they anticipated. And we know now, because teachers retire before the beginning of the new year, September year. So we know. So we're going to save money on gratuities for teachers for this year, but that may impact then on next year. But we're drawing up the numbers. But that's ongoing discussions. As I mentioned in response to a question from Deputy Fleming, big part of our role is marking, as we call it, vote sections in our department, marking each of the departments, and in detail discussing with them spending pressures, trends, in order to draw up the estimate and to work with them in terms of ensuring that they stay within the profile every year. So that's a significant part of what we do.
So in each of the departments then, as well as your own, gratuity payments are down this year, but anticipated to go up next year.
Yeah, I think that'll be our sense. If it is the case that across the board that the number of retirees are lower, we would expect that they'll increase next year, because we have a sense of the demographics. Obviously, we know the age profile, so we know the number of people of a given age with a given service. So we then can roughly calculate. People tend not to work beyond their 40 years, naturally enough, because they're not accruing any additional pension. We do have people who do work more than 40 years, which is always a surprise for me. There you go. Everybody's different. So we do have people who would have their full service and would have reached their preserved age, but still like working in the department so much, that they want to stay. So there's an element of uncertainty about all this.
But there's, I mean, and then in terms of the gratuity payments themselves, the amounts that are going in each department or in each sector in the department, those amounts are fixed. Is that fixed under Haddington Road, or how is it?
But that's fixed based on their conditions of employment.
Okay, so that'll be written into the contract when you came in. Yeah.
So it's 1.5 times 48 years of their salary. So if somebody has 40 years, so it's half their salary multiplied by 1.5.
Okay.
So that's how it's calculated. Yeah. The average gratuity for the civil service, I think, is 80,000. If I'm not mistaken, 80,000 is the average gratuity, and that obviously varies in sectors given.
That's after 40 years of service.
So this is the average. Yeah, the average for 2012 was 80,000 for established, and it was lower. It was lower for unestablished civil servants. Unestablished civil servants have lower levels, lower time served than established civil servants, who would tend to come in their late teens or early 20s and would work up the full time.
Okay. So then stepping back from that, what's the accrued liability?
Well, the accrued liability based on the report that was done in 2008 was 116 billion. and that's the net present value of all of